I've been thinking about something lately that I believe could change the financial trajectory of millions of American families. It's not complicated. In fact, it's almost embarrassingly simple. But like most simple things in life, hardly anyone actually does it. I'm talking about paying off your home mortgage years, even decades earlier than the bank expects you to. Now, before you think this is just another get-rich-quick scheme or some mathematical trick, let me be clear. This is about understanding how money works, how interest works, and how a few basic principles applied consistently over time can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars and give you something that's increasingly rare in America today: true financial freedom. I've spent the better part of 7 decades studying how money compounds, how businesses grow, and how ordinary people can build extraordinary wealth. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that one of the smartest financial moves most Americans can make is to pay off their home mortgage as quickly as possible. Not in 30 years, not in 15 years, but in 5 to 7 years, if you can manage it. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Warren, that sounds impossible. I can barely make my regular mortgage payment. How am I supposed to pay it off in a fraction of the time? That's a fair question, and I'm going to answer it. But first, let me explain why this matters so much. Let's start with the numbers, because numbers tell the truth. They don't have opinions, they don't care about your feelings, they just are. Say you buy a home for $300,000. You put down 20%, which is $60,000, and you finance the remaining $240,000 with a 30-year mortgage at 7% interest. Your monthly payment works out to about $1,600. Now, here's what most people don't realize. Over the course of that 30-year mortgage, you won't pay back $240,000. You'll pay back approximately $575,000. Let me say that again. You borrowed $240,000 and you're going to pay back $575,000. That extra $335,000, that's interest. That's the cost of renting money from the bank for 3 decades. Think about that for a moment. You're paying more in interest than you borrowed in the first place. You're essentially buying your house twice, once for yourself and once for the bank. Now, I'm not saying mortgages are bad. They're a tool, and like any tool, they can be used wisely or poorly. For many people, a mortgage is the only way to buy a home, and owning a home can be an excellent financial decision. But that doesn't mean you should accept the bank's timeline as inevitable. Here's what happens if you can pay off that same mortgage in 7 years instead of 30. You'll pay approximately $290,000 total. That's the $240,000 principal plus about $50,000 in interest. By paying it off in 7 years instead of 30, you save $285,000. That's money that stays in your pocket instead of going to the bank. But it gets better, because once you're free of that mortgage payment, you can redirect that $1,600 a month into investments. If you invest that money and earn a modest 8% annual return for the remaining 23 years, you'll have accumulated roughly $1.1 million. So the decision to pay off your mortgage early doesn't just save you $285,000 in interest, it potentially creates more than $1 million in additional wealth. That's the power of compound interest working for you instead of against you, and it's available to anyone who's willing to make it a priority. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet but matters just as much: peace of mind. I've met people worth millions who couldn't sleep at night because of their debts, and I've met people of modest means who slept like babies because they owed nothing to anyone. There's something profound about owning your home free and clear. It's not just a financial state, it's a psychological state. When you don't have a mortgage, you can't lose your home if you lose your job. You can take career risks. You can start a business. You can say no to work that doesn't fulfill you. You have options. And in life, options are valuable. Charlie Munger, my partner for over 60 years, used to say that the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Well, when you own your home outright, you protect yourself from one of the biggest potential interruptions to your financial compounding: foreclosure. During the 2008 financial crisis, I watched millions of Americans lose their homes. Good people, hard-working people, people who did everything they were supposed to do. But when the economy collapsed and jobs disappeared, they couldn't make their mortgage payments. The people who owned their homes outright didn't face that fear. They might have had to cut back on expenses, they might have had to dip into savings, but they didn't lose the roof over their heads. That security is priceless, and it's available to anyone willing to prioritize it. So let's get practical. How do you actually pay off a 30-year mortgage in 5 to 7 years? The answer is simple, but it's not easy. You need to pay more than the minimum payment, a lot more. Going back to our example, your required monthly payment on that $240,000 mortgage is about $1,600. To pay it off in 7 years, you need to pay roughly $3,400 a month. That's more than double. To pay it off in 5 years, you need to pay about $4,750 a month. That's triple the minimum payment. Now, I can hear some of you saying, Warren, I don't have an extra $1,800 or $3,150 a month lying around. I understand most people don't, but here's what I've learned in all my years of studying wealth creation. Most people can find money they didn't know they had when they make it a priority. Let me give you some strategies. First, redirect every raise and bonus. When you get a raise at work, most people immediately increase their lifestyle. Nicer car, bigger vacation, more expensive restaurants. But if you take every raise and put it toward your mortgage instead, you can make enormous progress without feeling like you're sacrificing. Let's say you get a 3% raise each year on a $75,000 salary. That's $2,250 more per year, or about $188 a month. It doesn't sound like much, but if you put every raise toward your mortgage from day one, the acceleration is remarkable. Second, eliminate or reduce other debts. If you're making car payments, credit card payments, student loan payments, you're hemorrhaging money in interest. Pay those off as aggressively as possible, then redirect those payments to your mortgage. I've never understood car payments. People spend $500, $600, $800 a month for years to drive a depreciating asset. Meanwhile, they're paying 5%, 7%, sometimes 10% or more in interest. It's madness. Buy a car you can afford with cash, drive it until the wheels fall off, take that car payment and put it toward your mortgage. Third, live below your means. This is probably the most important principle in all of personal finance, and it's the one most people resist. We live in a culture that equates spending with success, but I've learned that real success is measured not by what you spend, but by what you keep. I've lived in the same house in Omaha that I bought in 1958 for $31,500. People ask me why I don't buy a mansion. The answer is simple: I like my house. It serves my needs, and the money I didn't spend on a bigger house has compounded into billions. I'm not suggesting everyone needs to live like I do, but I am suggesting that most people can cut their spending by 20% or 30% without significantly impacting their quality of life if they're honest about what they truly need versus what they've been conditioned to want. Skip the $6 coffee every morning. That's $2,000 a year. Cook at home instead of eating out 5 nights a week. That could be $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Cancel subscriptions you don't use. Stop trying to impress people you don't even like with things you can't afford. These might sound like small things, but small things add up to big things over time. That's what compound interest teaches us. Fourth, increase your income. This is the variable with the most potential. There's a limit to how much you can cut expenses, but there's almost no limit to how much you can earn if you're creative and willing to work. Take a second job, start a side business, learn a new skill that makes you more valuable to your employer. Invest in yourself. I've always believed that the best investment you can make is in yourself. Your earning potential is your greatest asset, especially when you're young. If you can increase your income by $20,000 or $30,000 a year, suddenly paying off your mortgage in 5 to 7 years becomes realistic. Fifth, make one extra payment per year. If the other strategies feel overwhelming, start here. Just make one extra mortgage payment per year. On a 30-year mortgage, making one extra payment per year can cut about 6 years off your loan and save tens of thousands in interest. It's not as dramatic as paying it off in 5 to 7 years, but it's a significant improvement. You can break that extra payment into monthly chunks. Instead of paying $1,600 a month, pay $1,733. That extra $133 a month adds up to one full payment by year's end. Now, let me address something important. Paying off your mortgage quickly is a worthy goal, but it's not always the first priority. If you have high-interest debt, credit cards at 18% or 22%, pay those off first. It makes no mathematical sense to pay down a 7% mortgage while carrying 20% credit card debt. Similarly, make sure you're getting any employer match on your 401k before you pay extra on your mortgage. If your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of your salary, that's an immediate 50% return. You can't beat that paying down your mortgage. And make sure you have an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses and savings, because if an emergency comes up and you've dumped all your money into your mortgage, you can't get it back out without selling or refinancing. So the order should be 1. Get the employer 401k match. 2. Build an emergency fund. 3. Pay off high-interest debt. 4. Then accelerate your mortgage payments. Let me address some common objections I hear to this strategy. But Warren, mortgage interest is tax deductible. Yes, it is. But let's do the math. If you're in the 24% tax bracket and you pay $10,000 in mortgage interest, you get a tax deduction worth $2,400. Congratulations, you spent $10,000 to save $2,400. You're still out $7,600. The tax deduction is a small consolation prize for paying interest. It's not a reason to keep paying interest. And with the standard deduction now at $27,700 for married couples filing jointly, most people don't even benefit from the mortgage interest deduction anymore. But I can earn more investing that money in the stock market. Maybe the stock market has historically returned about 10% annually, but that's not guaranteed. There are periods where it returns much less or even loses money. Paying off your mortgage is a guaranteed return equal to your interest rate. If your mortgage is at 7%, paying it off is like earning a guaranteed 7% return, risk-free. Now, I've made my fortune investing in the stock market, so I'm not anti-stocks. But I'm also a believer in the value of guaranteed returns, especially when it comes to your home. Here's what I'd suggest: do both. Max out your retirement accounts to get the tax benefits and employer match. Then put any extra money toward your mortgage. But I might need that liquidity. This is a legitimate concern. Money you put into your home equity isn't easily accessible. You'd need to sell or take out a home equity loan. That's why the emergency fund is so important, and that's why I suggest you don't pay extra on your mortgage until you've built that cushion. But once you have that emergency fund, the illiquidity of home equity becomes less concerning. In fact, it can be a benefit. It prevents you from spending that money on impulse purchases. Let me zoom out for a moment and talk about why this matters beyond just the individual numbers. America has a debt problem. The average American household carries over $100,000 in debt when you include mortgages, car loans, student loans, and credit cards. We've normalized living in debt. We've accepted it as inevitable, but it's not inevitable and it's not healthy. Debt is a claim on your future income. When you're in debt, you're working partly for yourself and partly for your creditors. You're not truly free. I've lived through multiple recessions, market crashes, and economic crises, and what I've observed is that the people who suffer most in hard times are those with the most debt. The people who weather the storms best are those with the least debt. Financial resilience matters, and you can't have financial resilience when you're drowning in debt. By paying off your mortgage early, you're not just saving money on interest. You're building resilience. You're creating options. You're protecting yourself and your family from the inevitable ups and downs of economic life. Here's what excites me most about this strategy. It's not just about being debt-free. It's about what comes next. Once you've paid off your mortgage, you suddenly have an extra $1,600 or $2,000 or $3,000 a month that you're no longer sending to the bank. That money can be redirected to building wealth. You can max out your retirement accounts. You can invest in index funds. You can start a business. You can help your kids with college. You can give to causes you care about. This is where the real compounding begins, because now instead of fighting against interest, you have interest working for you. If you can redirect $2,000 a month into investments earning 8% annually in 20 years, you'll have about $1.2 million. In 30 years, you'll have about $3 million. That's the difference between a comfortable retirement and a wealthy retirement. And it all starts with paying off your mortgage early. There's one more thing I want to mention. The discipline required to pay off a mortgage in 5 to 7 years teaches you something invaluable about yourself. It teaches you that you're capable of delayed gratification, that you can resist the culture of instant consumption, that you can make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain. These are the qualities that separate wealthy people from everyone else. And once you develop them in one area of your life, they tend to spread to other areas. People who pay off their mortgage early tend to be better investors. They tend to save more. They tend to make smarter financial decisions across the board. It's not just about the mortgage. It's about becoming the kind of person who builds wealth. So here's what I'd like you to do. Get out a piece of paper and a calculator, or open up a spreadsheet and run the numbers on your own mortgage. How much will you pay in total interest if you stick to the 30-year plan? How much would you save if you paid it off in 10 years? 7 years? 5 years? Then ask yourself honestly, what could I change about my spending or my income to make this possible? Could you cut your expenses by 15%? Could you take on a side project that brings in an extra $1,000 a month? Could you redirect your next raise entirely to your mortgage? I'm not saying it will be easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. But I am saying it's possible, and I'm saying it's worth it. The truth is, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Paying off your mortgage in 5 to 7 years requires you to flip that script. It requires sustained effort, consistency, and discipline, but the rewards are extraordinary, not just financial rewards, though those are substantial, but the reward of knowing you own your home, that no bank has a claim on it, that you're building wealth instead of just servicing debt. That's the kind of security that lets you sleep well at night. And in my experience, that's worth more than almost anything money can buy. I'm 94 years old now, and I've seen a lot of financial fads come and go. I've seen people chase get-rich-quick schemes. I've seen them follow complex strategies that promise to beat the market. I've seen them do all sorts of clever things to try to optimize their returns. But you know what I've learned? The simple strategies work best. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Avoid debt. Let compound interest work for you over long periods of time. Paying off your mortgage early fits perfectly into this philosophy. It's simple, it's mathematically sound, and it works. You don't need to be a financial genius to do this. You don't need a high income, though it helps. You just need a commitment to live below your means and a willingness to prioritize long-term security over short-term consumption. I've said many times that the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. The same is true of mortgages. The impatient pay the full 30 years of interest. The patient pay it off early and keep that money for themselves. Which one will you be? The choice is yours. But I can tell you from experience, from having watched thousands of people build wealth over my lifetime, that the patient ones, the disciplined ones, the ones who think long term, they're the ones who win in the end. Your home is likely the biggest purchase you'll ever make. Make sure you're buying it for yourself, not for the bank. Pay it off, own it free and clear, then take everything you were paying to the bank and invest it in your future. That's how you build real lasting wealth, and that's how you ensure that the American dream of home ownership becomes not just a dream, but a fully owned reality. You know, people often ask me about the best investments I've ever made. They expect me to talk about Coca-Cola or Apple or some of the major acquisitions Berkshire Hathaway has completed over the years. But if I'm being honest, one of the best investments I ever made was buying my house in Omaha for $31,500 and paying it off quickly. Not because the house appreciated dramatically in value, though it has, but because owning it free and clear gave me freedom to take risks elsewhere. When I started my investment partnership in the 1950s, I didn't have to worry about making a mortgage payment. That security allowed me to be patient with my investments. It allowed me to think long term. It allowed me to take calculated risks that ultimately built Berkshire Hathaway into what it is today. I've always said that risk comes from not knowing what you're doing, but there's another kind of risk that comes from not having a foundation of security. When you're worried about keeping a roof over your head, you make desperate decisions. You chase returns you shouldn't chase. You take jobs you shouldn't take. You compromise in ways that hurt you in the long run. Owning your home outright eliminates that particular source of anxiety. And in doing so, it frees you to make better decisions in every other area of your financial life. There's something else I want to share with you about paying off debt early. It creates what I call a psychological snowball effect. When you make that first extra payment on your mortgage, something shifts. You see the principal balance drop a little faster than expected. You calculate how much interest you just saved, and it feels good. So you do it again the next month, and the next. Each time you see the progress. Each time the motivation builds, it becomes a game, a challenge you're winning. I've seen this happen with people at Berkshire Hathaway. Employees who commit to paying off their mortgages early often report that it changes their entire relationship with money. They become better savers. They become more conscious of their spending. They start looking for other ways to optimize their finances. Success breeds success. Discipline breeds more discipline. And momentum, once established, becomes self-reinforcing. This is the same principle that makes compound interest so powerful. Small actions repeated consistently create enormous results over time. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: the impact your financial decisions have on your children. Children learn about money primarily by watching their parents. If they see you constantly stressed about bills, constantly in debt, constantly just scraping by, that becomes their model for how adults handle money. But if they see you living below your means, making sacrifices to pay off debt, building security for the family, that becomes their model instead. When you pay off your mortgage early, you're not just improving your own financial situation. You're teaching your children that debt is not inevitable. That discipline pays off. That long-term thinking beats short-term gratification. These are lessons that will serve them throughout their lives, lessons that could save them from decades of financial struggle. I think about this often in my own family. My children and grandchildren grew up seeing that wealth doesn't require ostentation, that success doesn't mean spending everything you earn, that the real luxury is freedom, not possessions. Those lessons are an inheritance more valuable than any amount of money I could leave them. Let me share one more calculation with you, because I think it drives the point home powerfully. Let's say you're 35 years old and you've just bought your first home. If you follow the traditional 30-year mortgage path, you'll own your home free and clear at 65, just as you're retiring. But what if you pay it off in 7 years instead? You'll own it free and clear at 42. Think about what that means. From 42 to 65, that's 23 years without a mortgage payment. If your payment was $1,600 a month, that's $441,600 you won't have to pay. Now, instead of sending that money to the bank, you invest it at an 8% annual return compounded monthly. Those 23 years of $1,600 monthly investments grow to approximately $1.4 million. So the decision to pay off your mortgage in 7 years instead of 30 doesn't just save you the interest on the loan. It potentially creates $1.4 million in additional wealth. And that's assuming you only invest the amount you were previously paying to the bank. If you continue to live frugally and invest even more, the numbers become even more dramatic. This is what I mean when I say that small decisions compound into life-changing outcomes. The decision to pay an extra $1,800 a month on your mortgage for 7 years can easily create a multi-million-dollar difference in your net worth by retirement. The best time to start paying off your mortgage early was the day you signed the papers. The second best time is today. Every month you wait is another month of interest accruing, another month where your money is working for the bank instead of for you. I understand that life circumstances vary. Not everyone is in a position to double or triple their mortgage payment right away, but almost everyone can do something. Even if you can only afford an extra $100 a month right now, start there. Then as your income grows, as you eliminate other debts, as you cut unnecessary expenses, increase that amount. The important thing is to begin to make the commitment to prioritize becoming mortgage-free. I've never met anyone who regretted paying off their mortgage early, but I've met many people who regretted waiting so long to start. Thank you for watching. Now go run those numbers and see what's possible. Calculate what you'll pay if you follow the bank's 30-year schedule. Then calculate what you'll pay if you accelerate it to 10 years or 7 or 5. Look at the interest savings. Think about what you could do with that money. Then make a plan. Decide what changes you're willing to make. Set a target date for being mortgage-free and start today. Because here's what I know after 94 years on this planet and 7 decades in the investment business, time is your most valuable asset. The sooner you free yourself from debt, the sooner you can put time and compound interest to work building real wealth. The American dream isn't just about owning a home, it's about truly owning it, free and clear with no bank having a claim on it. That dream is within reach. You just have to be willing to reach for it. Good luck and happy investing.